All right, so my name is Abigail Rose Clarke, and this is a session on how to widen time. And I'm going to explain a bit on what I mean by that. Because really, if we're trying to change our culture and change our society, which is what social change is about and what social justice is about, then we can't ignore the body. And in fact, we have to start there. Our relationship to time has a large part of to do with our relationship to the body because of the way that our nervous system responds to stress. And time, when we feel like we're late, when we feel like we're rushed, when we feel like there isn't enough time, our nervous system responds to that as a threat, essentially. We feel like that's a stress, and that can make us feel like we have to speed up or we have to shrink ourselves down, sort of depending on conditioning. And when we feel like we have to shrink or speed up, the nervous system switches into threat mode and time shrinks on itself. And the reality of our current domination-based culture, which if you're in Anchor Continuum, you've heard me talk about that. That's the group that I hold weekly, not just monthly. But domination culture, to share a bit about how I define that, is the white supremacist culture that is always in the the focus of dominating something or someone else, whether that's the environment, and so we pave it and we bulldoze it and we make it climate controlled, or whether it's with each other or with one race group dominating another race group. It's a domination culture rather than a relationship based culture. And one of the sort of foundational aspects of domination culture is the sense of urgency. There's not enough time. Time is money. We have to get this together. I don't have time to listen to you. I don't have time to ask really how you are. I don't have time for this. We have to get this going, right? I mean, I've been in those Zoom meetings, haven't you? And especially when we're working on things that really matter, right? When we're working on aspects relating to social justice, it's not like we have all the time in the world to just dilly-dally and only talk about our feelings. We have to actually get the ball rolling. If you are in business for yourself, you don't have the luxury of just like hanging out and twiddling your thumbs from 9 to 5. You have to actually get things going. And yet this obsession with speed makes us, it sort of compresses time, and we don't have the ability to have creative responses. We're going to make the shift from domination-based culture, which is white supremacy culture, to relationship-based culture. We have to go into a relationship with our body. Our body has to be part of what we are creating a relationship with. And when our body feels stressed at all, threatened in any kind of way, part of the miracle of your nervous system is that you have different parts of it. And when you feel stressed, you go into the part of your nervous system that says, okay, there's a danger here. I got to focus and I got to get through. There is not enough time. Like we cannot be wasting time here. We got places to go. Right. But what happens when we go into that nervous system, part of the nervous system, which is so important, right? Like there's times when you just really got to get from point A to point B as quickly as possible. Everyone quotes how it comes from when the tiger was chasing us, but even still, sometimes you just got to get focused and you just got to get done. But what we miss, what has to take a step back when we go into that part of the nervous system, is the relational part of the nervous system, which, the vagus nerve is getting its more than 15 minutes of fame. I'm all here for it. So you've probably heard people talk about polyvagal theory and the vagus nerve, but to sort of break it down and make it simple, the part of the nervous system that is called the parasympathetic nervous system is the relational part of the nervous system. It means sometimes it's called the rest and digest part of the nervous system, whereas the sympathetic nervous system is that focus nervous system, is the fight or flight. The parasympathetic nervous system is the part of us that lets us ease back, get soft, get soothed. It's increased by like candlelight and long slow dinners and fireplaces and all those like cozy things. But it's also the way that we can take sort of a horizontal view of what's going on. And that means that I can pull creatively from different places, and I don't just get laser focused on this one idea that I think is right. And that means that when I am in the parasympathetic nervous system, when I'm in this place of rest and also responsiveness, I can respond. I don't just react. And there's a difference there. There's a difference in responding and reacting. A reaction is like, here comes a stimuli and quick, I go, right? It's kind of like why we do fire drills when we're kids, or like now, horror of horrors, it's why they do shooter drills, right? We want to be able to react. We don't want to have to think about what comes next. How do I do it? What am I doing? But the problem is that when we go into a reaction, we can really only do what we've already learned how to do. I can't learn something in a stressed out space where I feel like I'm in danger. It's why you have to do fire drills. It's why children today have to do shooter drills, right? Because there's no time to learn something new in that kind of situation. But when we can respond and not just react, now it's like there's the stimuli coming at me and I have space to make a different choice. I can choose something that I haven't done before. And the beauty of somatics is that somatics lets us widen that space. So the stimulus comes in, and rather than immediately reacting, I can now widen the space, not in chronological time, not so that I'm taking hours or weeks or months to respond, but so that I can widen the time and respond in a way that is actually in alignment with relationship culture. I use the analogy of fire drills and shooter drills, but this also happens, say, in our most intimate relationships, whether that's with friends, family, or lovers, where something happens and we get triggered, and it's like, before you know it, you've said the most hurtful thing, right? You just like, and it's like, who even said that? How did that even come out of my mouth? Being in the responsive part of the nervous system allows us to notice what is happening and then make a different choice, a choice that brings us closer into alignment with relationship culture. And it's something as simple, not basic, but simple, as learning how to give more tone to the part of the nervous system that allows us to be in this sort of peripheral wide gaze. What we're going to do now is we're going to give the breath the time that it takes to get as wide as it can. And by doing that, we're going to notice what changes in the body. I just invite you to get yourself comfortable so that you really give yourself that time. And that includes, like, if you sit in that chair every day and that's your Zoom chair and that's the chair that you feel like you always have to be on and get your game face on for, you might want to get out of it, because the body has this sort of memory of that chair being the place where you have to address issues or be on. And we're not doing that right now. If you can lean back, lean back. If there's any part of your clothing that is too tight, address that. If you find it helpful to move your head and release your neck a bit, go ahead and do that. Because we're giving ourselves time to make these little adjustments so that we're truly comfortable. And that can feel, sometimes it can feel like we don't have time for that, right? Sometimes urgency steps in and says, I just have to get this one thing done. But the thing is that when we show our body through these small choices, when we show our body through these small choices, that we're safe, because you don't lean back if you don't feel safe, right? You don't lie down in a space that you don't feel safe. So we're showing the body that we're safe. And then B, we're also showing the body that comfort is important, that we don't need to suffer or be martyrs, that we're actively and actually listening to what is needed. And these are small ways that we show ourselves that we're on our own side. And that helps us relax, at least a little. It helps us let the guard down at least one bar. So that now, as you're comfortable, you can once again turn your attention to your breath. And you notice when you're breathing in and when you're breathing out. And this is not an effort to change the breath. We're not changing it. We're simply noticing. I'm breathing in. I'm breathing out. But what you might notice, what is very likely that you'll notice, is that as you give your attention to the breath in that way, your breath will change. Just by giving your attention to the breath changes. And there's a huge difference between allowing a change to occur, such as the breath becoming deeper or more full, and forcing a change. So we're not forcing anything. Sometimes when the body is truly relaxed, the breath will even pause for a long moment. So we're not trying to force anything, we're just allowing something. Even if that means that we stop breathing for a few moments. That can happen when the nervous system is unwinding itself. And it can also happen when the nervous system reaches a deep level of relaxation. So we notice. And then we begin to invite the breath to change. Again, different than forcing. We invite the breath now to lengthen, to widen itself. So begin with the inhale. And as you inhale, long and slow, let the breath take the time that it takes to fill your body with breath, to fill your lungs. And they are quite big, your lungs. So it may take quite a long time. And then when the breath is full, you let the breath leave the body in the exhale. And it takes the time that it takes. And because the lungs are so big, it may take a long time to breathe all the way out. And we keep going like that, reminding ourselves that this is an invitation. We're not forcing anything. We're inviting the breath to take as long as it takes. Good. Now, as you continue to let the breath take as long as it takes, widening the breath, not beyond its capacity. We're not pushing ourselves. There's no push. We simply let the breath take as long as it takes. And you're sitting still now, or even lying down. So you're resting. So the breath will likely be quite soft. It would be different if you were walking or running or jumping around. It would be different then. But the body is in a resting state now, which means the breath is soft and the inhale can be soft and long. And you can let the tongue soften in the cave of your mouth. And you can let your eyes soften in the cave of your eye sockets, in the cave of your skull. You can even let your brain soften in the cave of your skull. The brain is, after all, an organ, and it can soften. And if your eyes aren't closed, that's okay. Sometimes it feels more comforting to keep them open, so no need to force them closed. But it is likely by now that your eyes are either closed or they are turned down so that your awareness is contained. It's drawn in towards yourself. You might find it helpful to do as I'm doing and to bring your hands to your chest or to your shoulders to help your body feel wider. Or it might feel better to do this without touch. You can feel how wide your body is. And with each inhale, let the breath widen through you, giving yourself the time that it takes to breathe all the way in and letting that inhale widen your body. And when you exhale, the body can release earthward, even just a touch more, receiving more support. Ask yourself, where does this sensation of rest and ease, where does it live in the body? For me, I find it most easily in my heart. That's me. That's where I find it. But you might find it in your belly or in your shoulders or even in your hands, that when you're stressed at all, the hands kind of naturally clench, and when you're relaxed, they open like flowers. And you might not have the answer to this question. It can take sometimes some practice and some focus to find the answer. But we're asking the question, where does this sense of ease and expansion and rest, where does it live in me? And then bring to memory a time when you didn't feel eased or restful, when it felt like time was shrinking in on itself, either because you were rushed, because deadlines were looming, or because it felt like 15 questions were being asked of you every second, or because you were having a hard conversation with someone, or whatever it is. Think of a time when you didn't feel like you had enough time. And notice how the body feels when you bring that memory back. How the body tends to constrict, how things feel tight, how the breath might already have gotten more shallow, less deep. And we're bringing it to mind, to the body mind. We're bringing this memory forward so that we can notice the difference so we can feel into it. And as you're in this state, notice the breath. Notice how your body feels where it is. And then practice making the conscious choice to widen once again. Because that's a memory after all. You don't have anyone asking you questions. You don't have anywhere to go. Exactly where you were a moment before when you're feeling the expansiveness. So we choose to bring that back. And we give the breath its time to widen. And we find that place in the body where that width and expansion is easy and possible to find. And we give our attention to that place. We let our attention widen that expansiveness through the body even more. And perhaps you can now somaticize, which is the word for bringing to the body mind a moment that has not occurred yet, feeling into it, living into a moment that has not occurred yet. You can somaticize that moment where you felt contracted, somaticize being in that moment, but with this width and expansion. So everyone's asking you 1,500 questions and you are still in width and expansion. You're having a difficult conversation with a loved one and you're in width and expansion. You're even perhaps navigating something that is quite truly difficult, but you can maintain a sense of width and expansion as you do so. You're giving yourself an opportunity to imagine this in the body and the mind, meeting a challenge, meeting a challenging situation, and maintaining a sense of width, maintaining a feeling that time is wide. It is not constricted and contracted around you. Time is wide, and you have plenty of it. Now, I invite you to make your hands warm by rubbing them together, especially if they're at all chilly. Make them warm. And then with those warm hands, place the warm hands wherever it is on your body that you are able to feel that expansiveness. If it's your heart or your shoulders, maybe it was your hands themselves. You touch your hands to your body with softness, with love, the way that you wish to be touched by someone else, you can give that touch to yourself. That's the beauty of it. You know how you wish to be touched, so you can give that to yourself. Feel how even that can make the body feel more able, more capable of widening, of expanding. If you're lying down, that would be a good time to roll to your side so you can transition slowly. You're sitting up, then what I would invite you to do is open your eyes, but look at something that is not your computer screen. Look out a window or even at the floor. But look at something that is not immediately the computer screen. And as you look at whatever it is that you've chosen to look at, let your eyes soften back into your skull. So you let the eyes be heavy and fall back towards you, so that the gaze is soft and you are receiving whatever it is that you are looking at. Whatever it is that you're looking at comes towards you, you receive it. This is something that we go over in more depth and more detail in Anchor Continuum, but it's something that, while it might not come immediately, with practice, this can be a truly accessible difference in how we look and witness the world. Now, when you're ready, we'll come back and you can look at the screen if you want to. You don't have to. You can listen. You don't have to put your video on if you don't want to. Time when, if you have questions, you can either write them in the chat or ask them.
So I wanted to ask, in these practices of widening time and the nervous system and how we're moving from reacting to responding. Can you just speak to the in the moment responses and the ways that this practice can hold us or shift things potentially?
Yeah, that's such a good question. I'm so grateful you asked it. So as I was saying in the beginning, when you have these aspects of the nervous system that say we need to react because there's a specific threat, a specific danger, and I need to just react as quickly as possible, versus this other part of the nervous system that says we have time, I can respond in creative ways. The key is to be able to respond in difficult moments, which is, I think, what you're asking about, like how to have how to have this in like not a relaxing easy conversation maybe, but a difficult one, right? So the key here is in being able to understand perceived threats from actual threats. That's one specific piece. Because we are dismantling toxic cultural systems, one of the things that we are also having to navigate is how there are real threats and there are perceived threats. So say in a conversation that is now moving more towards argument, that can feel threatening to us if we have depending on personal histories. There can be unconscious biases that are coming to play. There can be all sorts of reasons where we start to feel like it's a threat and it's actually not. And that's why it's so important to have these sort of baselines of being like, okay, I know how my body feels when it's in an expansive place, and I know how my body feels when it's in a contracted place. So if we have the benefit of time, like if there is the possibility to say, I need to table this conversation, then I can say it, because now I'm noticing that the nervous system has become contracted. So that's one thing, because sometimes we feel like there's no time, but that's partly because the nervous system is telling us that actually everything is a threat and like the bomb will go off. So it's important to remember that if we have at least 20 minutes, right? Like the body needs 20 minutes to metabolize stress hormones. So even like saying like, let's take a quick walk, let's take a bio break and come back to this. Most things do have 20 minutes. Like even if it's like they're really difficult, we have a deadline and it's like we don't want to waste our time. We don't want to like dilly-dally or fall into the luxury of privilege. But then there's also times when we have to respond in the moment because there's, like there is a fire or there is a threat. And in that time, being able to feel grounded in the body, so being able to feel your feet on the earth or your seat on the earth, wherever it is that you are supported by on the earth, that lets the nervous system remain in a responsive state for as long as possible. Dr. Porges, who created the polyvagal theory, calls it the window of tolerance. And it's this, which to me always sounds like it's something that comes from Jim Henson. I don't know, I see Muppets when I think of that. But it's this idea that the window of tolerance says that it's the amount of time that we can stay in a potentially stressful situation and stay responsive. And then matched with it's lengthening that amount of time that we can stay in it and shortening the amount of time that we need to recover, right? So by staying in these practices, I shorten the amount of time that I need to recover. When I notice that I need to recover, I can maybe get it down to that 20 minutes, or even better, I can just take like, I can say like, pause, let's have a moment, 30 seconds. If I'm not yet flooded, if my nervous system is not yet at its max, I don't even need 20 minutes. We can just like be like, hey, collective breath work, right? Like, let's like have a few moments where we breathe together. I'm feeling like we're starting to escalate. And then we don't even need those 20 minutes. And we definitely don't need the 2 weeks, 2 years, whatever, how much time to repair when we say something or do something that is hurtful because we were in a stress space, right? Which is really when that 20 minutes starts to look like a way shorter amount of time than the 2 years or 2 decades, or just basically like now that relationship's done because you said something you shouldn't have said. So the idea of having a nervous system that is responsive in that way is that we can notice when we're starting to move out of that responsive state and come back to it more quickly, and then also stay in the responsive state as long as possible and not get pushed or pulled out of it so quickly. And part of that is being able to remain grounded and to notice, okay, things are happening, it's intense here, right? Like there's a fire, there's a flood, there's an actual argument, there's a cop, there's something that's going on that's really intense. But then also being able to notice, do I think this is intense, or is it intense? Is my conditioning telling me that this is dangerous, or is it dangerous? Because someone raising their voice can feel dangerous if we were raised around yelling people or have been taught that like that's dangerous or violent. But sometimes it's just a cultural difference, right? And like some people get loud, right? So it's like understanding those differences allows us to have more, we can hold more. Did that answer the question? Okay, good. All right, the recording is still going. So any other questions? Go for it.
Yeah, quick reflection. It was really powerful when you asked us to bring up the memory, and that was so powerful to see that contrast in my body. And I think I'll bring that into lots of situations. And now I can locate it. That's what I find is when I can locate it in my body, it's like that gives me this whole extra language and way, just way to move through the world and way to be with people and way to communicate what's going on. Question, one that's really up for me is around timeliness, and especially timeliness related to white supremacy. In some circles that I've been in, they say that like the idea of being on time and having this crisp timeliness is directly related, maybe even came out of that compared to a lot of indigenous cultures. And as somebody who where timeliness is not my greatest strength, like there's a temptation for me to be like, haha, like great, that's a part of white supremacy I didn't absorb, but that seems a little too easy. So I'm curious about your position on that.
I think that's a really excellent question that has to be put through the filter of who's upset and why. And so one thing to notice, like I'll speak as a white person. Am I showing up late because I feel entitled to someone's time? Because sometimes that's like, it can be way down there, but it can be in the conditioning for why I'm showing up late. Because I feel like it's okay. Other people, I don't either. My time is it can sometimes be this like weird sort of self-depreciation where it's like, I'm not so important, so they don't even need me. But it's like, well, if I'm not important, then why am I even in the room, right? Clearly I'm necessary in some way. So if I'm showing up late because I don't feel like I need to show up on time because someone else's time isn't valuable, that's white supremacy. That's saying like, I'm better than you, so I don't need that. I don't need to honor your time. But if I'm now saying that anyone who is like 5 minutes late is super rude, completely like, and this goes for, it shows up more often in white people being frustrated at people of color for being late. But it can be even for white people being frustrated at other white people for being late. It's like, do I feel like I'm so important that how dare you waste my time? Versus leading with curiosity and also being like, leading with curiosity and with clarity. So it's like if someone's late to meet with me, It's like, even if I'm frustrated, my goal for myself is to always lead with curiosity and concern. Like, are you okay? Did something happen? And not just be like, how dare you? But then also lead with clarity. So like an example with clients, to make sure that folks know, like, in an emergency situation, I'm going to understand, but if you keep having a pattern of not showing up to sessions, like, now you forfeit sessions. And giving people grace that we're all in this sort of, like, time is kind of collapsing on itself, and tech breaks and weird things happen. So by leading with curiosity and concern, we let it be a more human situation, rather than about, like, how dare you waste my time, but to constantly check for why I would feel like I can be late. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's awesome. Thanks.
Mhm. If you want to go deeper into this, if this taste like really tickled your fancy, just know that Anchor Continuum is a group that I facilitate. We meet once a week, and we have an online learning space as well. And we go into these topics at a much deep. We're able to really lather, rinse, and repeat them. So we go into some really deep spaces together. And that is, it's always open. It's meant to be accessible, and if you're interested, there it is. Thank you all so much for being here. It was a pleasure to see you, to breathe together, and hopefully see you soon and in the future. Bye.